it's my pride to introduce our first speaker, Alan Ladwig, who is the Deputy Associate Administrator for Public Outreach at NASA. He's going to talk to you about creating a 21st century in space enterprises.
You hear me okay? Well, it's good to be here. Mike Lembeck and I are on the 4-year plan here. We both spoke at the SpaceVision conference 4 years ago, so it's a delight to be back. Plus, I'm an Illinois boy. I was born in Elgin. I went to school in Southern Illinois, so it's always good to get back to the flatlands. Anybody here from SIU? Something like that. It is just a quick update. The shuttle was scrubbed today, STS-133. I sympathize with the bus dilemma, money for that. I can't tell you how much money is being sucked down the drain for buses for all our VIPs this week with all the launches that we've had. It's going to be very tough to get through the year. But they're going to have a mission meeting at 11 o'clock, and at 1 o'clock they'll have a press conference and announce what they're going to do. I suppose there's a slim possibility they will try to launch tomorrow. I'm starting to see a lot of email traffic that they may have to wait until December, which would be unfortunate, but we launched those shuttles before its time. Are there any Twitterers in the crowd? Woo! All right. Well, I've recently joined the Twitter Nation. I was forced into it in a bad way when I spoke at ISU last February. I was a kickoff speaker there, and I was all hopped up on European caffeine, coffee, and I was told to be provocative, so I got a little carried away and used the phrase "bite me" when referring to people that didn't that thought Obama had canceled human spaceflight. That was twitted immediately, and the journey of that ended up being brought up in a congressional hearing to my boss, the administrator of NASA. So be gentle with me today. If I get a little carried away, think twice before you hit that Twitter. And also, I just tweeted a little while ago, or tweeted, and I said that at the University of Illinois, no leaks, good weather, we're go for the walk. So here we go. I want to talk to you about what's going on with the space program now. It's a very dynamic time. I've been in this program for about 30 years now, and I've never seen anything quite like the confusion that's going on. What are we doing? Where are we going? We had kind of an inelegant rollout of the president's budget last February, where a lot of people were caught by surprise by the significantly radical direction that the president decided to take. They did not brief anybody on the Hill about it first, which was probably not the smartest thing to do. In fact, we at NASA didn't really know about it until that morning. So hopefully we learned a lesson from that, and we won't do that kind of thing again. But it caused a lot of disruption throughout the whole year, a lot of hurt feelings, why people weren't told, and we dealt with a lot of misinformation for most of the year. And the biggest misinformation had to do with the president's stance on human spaceflight, but I'll get into that in a little bit. So it was, the Authorization Act was passed on September 29th, and the House passed the Senate version, and that was for $19 billion for NASA, and that's what the president requested. How that $19 billion is going to be spent is a little different than what we had planned, but we think the president got most of what he wanted, with some compromises being made along the way. In terms of the federal budget, yeah, $19 billion, by the way. Yes, that's a lot of money. It is it's less than 0.5, or less than 0.5% of the federal budget. So during the high point of the Apollo program, NASA had 4% of the federal budget. The high point being about 1964, so I think. So back then, 40% of the federal budget. Today, we're doing a much broader range of things with a lot less money. So those of us that are in the space choir feel that NASA is a good value for the taxpayer. But when you do public polling, the public thinks that NASA spends approximately 1/3 of the federal budget because we are so visible. So that's the perspective. Now what we're hoping is that we can hang on to that 0.5%. And whether or not we're going to be able to do that with the new Congress, because right now we're on a continuing resolution. That means that we have to be at the spending levels of last year, and we won't be able to have our FY 2011 budget, fiscal year 2011 budget implemented until the Appropriations Committee gives us a budget. That was all put on hold because of the election, and now we're waiting for them to come back to see what they're going to do. There might be a slim chance they have an omnibus bill that funds all agencies, and maybe we'll squeak by, but we're also hearing that now that the Republicans are in control of Congress, they want to take all non-discretionary agencies, of which NASA is a part, back to the 2008 levels. And if that happens, then we start over again. It's going to be a very difficult time for all of us in the aerospace industry. Nonetheless, we look forward to working with Congress in the weeks ahead to try to come up with a spending plan that reflects the best elements of the Authorization Act and supports an affordable and sustainable space program. Now, where we're at these days is trying to get away from the Apollo paradigm. You all are too young to have been around during the Apollo program. When I think about the fact that when I was in college, World War II was about 25 years prior to when I was in college. Well, likewise, the Apollo program is now 40 years ago. So I can't even imagine what perspective you all must have. World War II meant nothing to me. I have no perspective on it whatsoever. So then when we have the Apollo program, it's the highlight of what NASA's done. It's the benchmark of everything we do. The old saying, if you can land a man on the moon, why can't you do X? So we've had that paradigm hanging over us that you had to have a single goal for the agency and that everything needed to get behind that. That's been a difficult thing to do because we do such a broad range of things these days. And I'm not sure that paradigm any longer is valid. The president felt that way, and when he was at the Kennedy Space Center on April 15th of this past year, he said that he wanted to talk about the next chapter for the space program. That our goal is the capacity for people to work and learn and operate and live safely beyond the Earth for extended periods of time, ultimately in ways that are more sustainable and even indefinite. And in fulfilling this task, we will not only extend humanity's reach of space, we will strengthen America's leadership here on Earth. So despite how the opposition spun the message, the president did not cancel human spaceflight with the FY 2011 budget. In fact, he extended human spaceflight with the extension of the space station until 2011. The previous administration was going to cut off space station funding beginning in 2016. They had put their hopes on a moon landing by 2020, but they never funded it appropriately so that we could have met that goal. The Augustine Commission last year said we'd have been lucky to get to the moon by 2028, so there potentially could have been a downturn or downtime of shuttle astronauts in space for the next 15 plus years. So at least we have the space station continuing, and we'll put our astronauts in orbit, and we will continue to work. So the budget was actually a top-line increase over 5 years of $6 billion, for a 5-year total of $100 billion, $19 billion for 2011. And so now, here are all the broad range of things we're doing these days and how this money is going to be spent. The President's budget put additional money into aeronautics. I'm on my third tour of NASA right now. This is my second as a political appointee. I was also there in the 80s as a civil servant. And when I was there the last time under the Clinton administration, the aeronautics budget was about $1 billion. When I came back, it was about $400 million. So we're trying to get that budget pushed back again because aeronautics is a critical economic competitive activity for this country, and it is an important thing that the public can really relate to because we all fly in planes. I don't have the video version of this picture, but it starts off with just a few planes on the East Coast, and as the day progresses, you see this buildup of planes. So there's a lot flying. Air travel is going to increase in the future. future, and we really need to have a safe national airspace system, and NASA is a key ingredient to that. Another priority for this administration is green aviation, and NASA has a front row seat for that. Things like the Boeing 48B. We want to look for more fuel efficient, lower emission, and quieter engines. And if we can do that, it'll make our industry much more competitive, it's better for the environment, and it's better for the industry overall. The aeronautics program will also do advanced research, things like two-stage to orbit reference vehicle on the top, X-51A test in the 8-foot tunnel on the bottom left, and on the far right, an inflatable re-entry vehicle concept. These are the kinds of things that aeronautics does that can contribute to human exploration. And we're also doing studies on next generation aircraft. These are the things that will, like in the bottom right-hand corner, a new version of an SST, or up in the upper left-hand corner, as I understand it, these wings would actually kind of fly like a bird, which I think is just fascinating. The budget also supports a lot of things in Earth and space science. It supports the climate initiative, which is a big deal for this administration. We want to understand what is happening in Earth on a global system from environmental activity, things like the Greenland ice mass changes, what's happening in the Arctic Circle, ozone, what have you. The budget accelerates the priorities that the National Academy of Sciences came up with for the Earth Science Decadal Plan. Pull some of those missions up sooner and will allow policymakers to have data much quicker. We're going to continue to monitor the Earth. And if there's anybody that doesn't understand the value that NASA brings to the public, I show you three pictures. Upper left, the Gulf oil spill. We had a big part in helping understand where was the spill going, how could we contain it, and we provided that information to the emergency teams and policymakers. Upper left was the Iceland volcanic eruption last year that impacted global air travel, and we traced where that plume was going. And the bottom one here is the most recent. This is the Indus River in Pakistan, images from the NASA Terra satellite that we're understanding what's happening with the flooding that's going on there. And we provide that information to the government. I love this picture of the global fire map. This is a series of images that were put together, but this is fires that are going on across the Earth at any certain time, and that's important to understand. In the space science area, we're going to continue with our search with our discoveries at Mars with robotic landers. The next one will be the Mars Science Lab that we're doing with the European Space Agency, due to launch later next year. And they'll continue to search for water. The one thing where I kind of tweaked NASA for, being in the Office of Communications, is I'm a little confused, I don't know about the rest of you, on water on Mars. I don't quite understand the full story that's there. I think it's an interesting story that water is there, and where there's water, we think there could have been life. But I went back and looked, and since 2003, I could find all these headlines. NASA discovers water on Mars, up until about a week ago. NASA discovers water on Mars. So I went to the science guys and said, hey, what is the story here? I'm very confused. What does it mean? Why do we keep discovering water on Mars? It's at the poles, it's at the equators, it's 6 feet down, it's 2 inches down, we scraped it, we saw it, it's snow, it's slush, it's methane. What the hell is it and what does it mean? So in December, we're going to put together a program that brings all that research together, tries to explain it, what does it mean, and not just with a bunch of knucklehead scientists that will talk in language that nobody can understand, which happened to us at the IAC conference last week, or a couple weeks ago. But we'll do their press conference, we'll put out the press release, but we'll also do a series of things for the public. Public lectures, things for kids, try to have that message of water on Mars broadcast in a number of different venues and not just relying on a single press conference. If any of you have ideas on that, I'd love to hear it. We're also going to continue to study near-Earth asteroids. This is actually a topic that's starting to bring a lot of attention. Sometimes it's hard to go to the general public and say, well, we've got to study asteroids because, the big one's coming in on us in the next 30 years. it almost doesn't pass the snicker test in a way. They go, oh, that's never going to happen. We don't have to worry about it. Last time was a couple billion years ago. Tell that to the dinosaurs. So we have a program where we're trying to catalog all the asteroids that are out there. And there's a big program with the UN that's trying to have a study going on of what do you do about asteroids. Can you deflect them? Mike, are you going to talk about that all in your talk tomorrow? Your work with asteroids? Why don't you do that? Because Mike followed that more than most people. Great student program, by the way. Anybody here from Iowa? Did I see somebody from Iowa? Did you guys do some big thing with near-Earth asteroids?
It's Iowa State.
What's that?
Iowa State.
Or Iowa State, sorry. I can't go just a little We'll continue with the Hubble Space Telescope. Window to the past and the future. It's celebrating its 20th anniversary this past year. And I think you'd all agree that Hubble has rewritten every astronomy textbook, continues to do so by the day. If you haven't had a chance to see it yet, make a point to go see the movie, the IMAX movie, Hubble in 3D. It is mind-blowing. You will see the astronauts in the cargo bay of the shuttle repairing the Hubble Space Telescope. You feel like you are right there. When Mike Massimino sticks his hand up the telescope to do that repair, you're like going with him. And then when it starts going out into the universe and showing pictures, and you get this appreciation for the depth. It's not this, when you see a picture like this, it's not like these things are all next to each other. They're billions of light years apart. It is a mind-blowing movie. And I defy anybody from the general public to watch that movie and not get keyed up to the space program. But you ain't seen nothing yet. Wait till the James Webb Telescope comes along in 2014, being built by the conference sponsor, Northrop Grumman. And this gives you appreciation for the size of it. This will be at a libration point. This is at the Goddard Space Flight Center. I tried to count all the people here. I gave up. It's about 250, but this thing is immense. And it's had some problems with schedule and cost over the years. We think it's on track for a 2014 launch. Then the budget also supports shuttle funding through retirement. Before Obama came along, they were going to cut off shuttle funding at the end of the fiscal year 2010, so that if we couldn't have gotten all the shuttle flights in, we were going to have to eat that money from other programs. But they continue to fund it, thank goodness, because we are now into the next fiscal year. We have 133 that's going to launch, goodness knows when, 134 that's scheduled for February 26th, I think it is, and then there could be an additional launch on a need flight that the authorization bill approved. That would be no earlier than June of next year. We need to have a decision made by that sometime in December in order to adequately plan for it. So we're standing by to see if the money, the appropriations money, actually comes along to go with the authorization. The biggest part of the budget was the approval of the continuation of the space station. It continues the station until at least the year 2020. It expands uses for ISS for scientific, technical, diplomatic, and educational purposes. It gets us now a chance that it's going to finally be completed with the 134 mission next February. We can start using it for all the research promise that it was developed for to begin with. It'll be used for testing and maturing new technologies required for human exploration. And it continues the partnership that we started with 16 different countries. And I think that is a major thing for people to consider, that this has been going on for 10 years of continual operations with people on board the shuttle, another 10 years before that of building the thing, or starting on it. And that's rather significant. What other international cooperative programs do we have that have gone on that long with this level of success, where there's never been any problem or breakdown between the partners? And that is why my kind of side thing that I'm trying to do is get the International Space Station Partnership nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. I think it's that important. If anybody happen to know a Nobel winner, please tell them to write a letter. With 10 years of operation, we had 100 launches for 4 agencies. It was built with 150 spacewalks, 195 people from 15 countries that lived and worked on the shuttle or space station, and it has traveled 1.7 billion miles since 1998. We will continue now to use it as a national laboratory, more focus on utilization of the ISS, more opportunities for commercial partners, other agencies such as the Department of Agriculture, National Institutes of Health have signed agreements with NASA, and things that international partners do, and things that students can do. And we'll get to that in a little bit. The budget also supports the 21st Century Launch Complex. This is to revitalize facilities down at the Kennedy Space Center. Most of the facilities down there were built in the Apollo program. It's a long time ago. It's down there getting all that sea air and seawater and stuff. Everything's rusting and corroding. So we have to do a lot of upgrades so that we can help accommodate some of the new launch vehicles that are coming along. That will also help mitigate somewhat the loss of jobs that took place at the end of the shuttle program. And by the way, President Obama did not end the shuttle program. That decision was made 6 years ago. We've all known this day was coming. The fact that people waited until the last second to try to look for something else is unfortunate. Many people said, well, but we thought the next program, Constellation, was going to make up for it. Well, the whole reason that we were getting rid of the shuttle, or among the reasons, was it was too expensive to operate. It required too many people. We're not going to have an economic launch system if you have to have 25,000 people to launch it. So we never intended to replace all those people in the new launch system with all the workers that we had before. We were hoping they could migrate to other things, especially to the commercial sector. Again, not all those numbers, but somewhat. So people like SpaceX and Orbital that started with the COPS program, the Commercial Orbiting Transportation System, that's been going on now for, 3 years, maybe 4 years almost. And the big milestone for that's coming up later this month with Falcon 9 for SpaceX for their first launch. So the budget continues money for commercial cargo and crew. The authorization bill continues both COTS and expands commercial crew development program. However, it does reduce the funding that the President requested from $3.3 billion down to $1.3 billion. And this has been a very controversial area, as I'm sure some of you have followed, particularly in states where NASA has senators, where the senators and congressmen from those areas didn't like the idea of NASA shifting to the commercial sector. This is a huge part of the Obama plan. It's to not have NASA build and operate its own launch systems, but to rely on the private sector. This is going to be something that not just the new space companies can do, the legacy companies can do as well. As I like to say, the legacy companies don't have a monopoly on NASA contracts, but the new space companies don't have a monopoly on innovation. So this could be a good thing to start getting some competition going. Then there's the issue of the Orion. This is something that's kind of survived from the Constellation program, but it has now been reinvented as a multi-purpose crew vehicle. We will continue to use the Orion as kind of the reference system for safety features and designs and systems, but that's going to be done in-house by NASA, but at the same time, external or commercial companies are also free to participate in that. We wanted, the authorization bill asked for money to develop a space launch system with the capability to launch 70 to 100 tons to LEO without an upper stage, and the capability to carry an integrated Earth departure upper stage to carry 130 tons or more. The goal is for full operations of the core units by the end of 2016. It could be a very sporty schedule, especially if you don't get the full funding that we need to do that. Then the budget supports what we call flagship space technology demonstrations, and these include investments in technology for capabilities such as automated rendezvous and docking, upper left corner, fuel transfer, upper right, inflatable habitats such as down here left, and aero braking. We want to continue to coordinate the development of these technologies, make sure they're applicable to things that our mission directors are looking at, and have a unified approach to technology development, which has not always been the case in the past. Also, we're going to have enabling technologies such as in situ or on-site resource utilization, autonomous landing, electric propulsion, and human robotic interfaces, such as our friend Robo-2 here that's being launched on this flight. We'll have robotic precursors to help us ferret out where should we send humans on the moon, Mars, asteroids, wherever we end up. The goal at the moment, as I understand it, is an asteroid by 2025, but until I see some real funding to go with the program, I've been in this business long enough, call me cynical, but I'm going to hold off advocating that one until I see it is real. Then we're going to have a lot of reliance, and that's another part of the administration's goal, is more reliance on prizes and competitions. So things like the glove competition, the Northrop Grumman Lunar Lander, centennial challenges that we have. This is an opportunity for new companies that have not been part of the NASA family in the past to come up with innovative ideas. We're throwing a wide net for ideas and concepts of how to do things differently, and the administration is fully behind that, and so we're going to be promoting more of those. Again, we need to make sure the appropriations come in to fund the NASA prizes. Another part that I'm very excited about that the administration was promoting is public engagement. There was $5 million in the budget request to study public engagement, to look at what kind of infrastructure technologies we need to make sure that you all can participate in our space exploration and discovery missions. That did not make it into the Authorization Act. However, we are going to go ahead. We already do participatory exploration in a big way at NASA. The study on that was being done by the Exploration Mission Systems Directorate, is where the money was going to be put. That effort is now being transferred to my office. So over the next 6 months, we're going to be setting up how do we have a good participatory engagement program for the public. How do you get more engaged so that you're not just vicariously watching people do things, but you are there. And that's going to have, they've got this kind of a matrix they've built of different ways of having engagement through information dissemination, content interaction, conversations and discussions, direct public submissions and contributions, and then two-way collaboration. And again, I would love to hear your ideas on how can we do a better job of engaging you in these things. With all these social media tools that we have, we think NASA's been kind of at the leading edge of using those tools, but we know there's a lot more innovation out there. That's why we have these tweet-ups and things that we just had at this mission. So, because you guys have some good ideas that we want to hear. So please let us know. STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics is a huge priority for this administration. They have the Educate to Innovate program. NASA's response to that is the Summer of Innovation that has just concluded and will continue again next year. Many of you are members of universities that are part of the Space Grant Consortia, and that's the venue we're using to implement the Summer of Innovation. The authorization bill directs NASA to develop a program to annually sponsor science and education payload development with students and educator involvement. And we already do a lot of that already, things like the moon buggy race on the right-hand side that's held out at the Marshall Space Flight Center. There's programs on the space station where university students have experiments on board. And so we're going to continue those kinds of things. And again, we're always looking for new ideas on how to engage people. So what is going to be the impact? What are some of the variables out there that could really change the way we see the space program? Well, one thing is going to be suborbital flights and space tourism. This is the thing that when I was at NASA the last time was, again, this was the snicker factor. Space tourism, never happened. And there were a lot of people within NASA that weren't necessarily against it, but they sure as heck didn't embrace it. I know when the first space tourist, Dennis Tito flew up to the space station, spent $25 million of his own money to go to a space station that everybody said wasn't worth the damn to begin with. And yet, senior people at NASA were questioning his patriotism because he was going up there and paid money that went to the Russians to do it. Well, I can't help it if the Russians have become more capitalist than we are on this. The whole world has gone upside down, as far as I'm concerned. But we ought to be embracing it. So now these private companies have stepped up. Not only do you have Francis, Virgin Galactic, X-Corp up in the right corner, Bigelow that wants to take you to a space hotel, Jeff Bezos from Amazon has his own program called Blue Origin. Right. There's so many of them I can't keep track. So a lot of things are going on. Now, are they going to be successful? I don't know. They got people signing up. Is there enough of a market there to sustain? We'll have to wait and see. But if it does, I think that this is something that can significantly change the way we all think about space. That no longer is space the domain of government employees, of astronauts who go up and come back, and that's all there is to it. With more and more people going, then I believe they'll come back with other ideas about what to do in space. So I think it's a very exciting thing. As a government employee, I hope these people succeed, and I hope they succeed beyond their wildest imagination. Now, we want to make sure that what they do is done safely, but as they start to get some operational experience, NASA might benefit from using their vehicles to fly our astronauts and or use their capabilities and infrastructure for our science and technology activities that we want to do. So this is a good thing. I hope these people succeed, and we'll find out. The one thing I think that will really turn things upside down is if Space Adventures comes across with their goal of actually being able to orbit a private citizen around the moon. And if that happens, then I think things really change rapidly about how we think about space. So, why do we go? Well, the Augustine Committee, when they came out with their report, this is the big question we always get. Yeah, well, why are you doing it? The Augustine Commission stated it very succinctly. That human space exploration is about expanding humanity into the solar system. So, our challenge is that too broad of a goal? Is that something that the general public is willing to sign up for? Especially in these particular economic times that we have. You got some people out of work, you got people that are being kicked out of their homes. Very challenging times. If you go up to them and say, yeah, but we're going to spend $19 billion this year because we want to expand humanity into the solar system. That's a hard sell these days, I really think. And how we do that has to be done with enough sensitivity and enough of a sense of mission that we can do this, yet we can do all the other things this nation needs to do and support. And I still come back and contend that for less than 0.5% of the federal budget, there is enough capability to do both things. Because we have to have somebody that is out on the leading edge, somebody that is pushing technology, doing science advances, because those are the things that drive economic and national security, economic growth and national security requirements for the nation. So with that, I will say we are working toward taking humanity up the next loop of the evolutionary spiral. I think SEDS students will have a tremendous opportunity to impact the future of space opportunities. I got my start with a student group, and it opened networks to me and contacts that I would have never imagined I had. And I'm a humanities major. Imagine what a scientist and engineer can do through this network. And I'm very eager to see what you all will bring to the table. I think that within the next 5 years, there's going to be a tremendous overturn of personnel throughout the aerospace industry. Us baby boomers are getting on, and I know you young people were like I was when I was your age, and I looked at somebody that was 60 and said, when the hell are you going to retire? So that I can have your job. So I think in another 5 years or so, you're going to see tremendous openings and opportunities for you. So if this is the career where you have your passion, if this is something you'd like to contribute, I urge you to be a little patient, and those opportunities will come. So until then, see you in Oregon. So I'll go ahead and take
expectations of the changes in Congress for this next election will be for the future of NASA? Do you think this will make it more difficult to continue on with that President Obama wants to do, or will we still be able to follow that?
Well, certainly the House and even the Senate Republicans have made it very clear they want Obama to be a one-term president, and that they don't feel the need to do much of anything to help him out, which is a sad statement on politics, but could be the reality we're dealing with. I think to answer your question, I don't know. We got to wait till they come back from the election break, see if they're able to make any movement on the continuing resolution, or if there is enough of a push to wait until the new Congress is installed in January. And in that case, if they follow through with what they said they're going to do, they talked about taking us back to 2008. And then we got to go back to the drawing boards and reprioritize what we want to do. So, as I said earlier, in my 30 years in business, this is the most challenging and difficult time I've ever seen. Makes you want to come to work. Yes?
To elaborate on that, do you have any hunches on what happened with the mythical SEDS 135?
Well, again, if we're going to do that, and if we're going to do it safely in the June timeframe, we really need to know at some point in December, is what we've told them. So, if they don't get around to talking about it until January, then that makes it difficult. Of course, NASA always likes to step up and say, well, yeah, we said December, but if you tell us in January, we can still do it right. I suspect that if they determine they couldn't do it safely, they could ask to have it pushed into, say, July. But again, this is another wild card that we just can't answer today based on the information we have. But it's going to be a great issue to watch. Yes, sir.
You know, kind of continuing that discussion, if you have to cut back, and the strategic question is, will NASA then develop a heavy lift launch? The jobs and the NASA infrastructure are in the red states, in Marshall and so forth. So I'm a little cynical, but I suspect that the Republicans may favor that.
You think?
And, yeah, and they may also be more enthusiastic about shuttle-derived technology continuing.
I think you're right. I think that things like the climate initiative are going to be a piggy bank to maybe pay for some of that if they cut us back to the 2008 level. Maybe aeronautics, because there are some views on certain political spectra that believe funding aeronautics is subsidizing industry, and that why isn't a mature industry like aeronautics making those investments themselves? Our response to that is some of these things are pushing technology so far that a corporation doesn't have the resources to do that themselves or take that amount of risk. So we want to buy the risks down for them first. So, you know, I don't know. This whole heavy lift thing is going to be interesting to watch because there's some people that are still hanging on that somehow constellation's going to reemerge from the ashes. I don't know how. Yes, sir.
There was a lot of great publicity generated from the Centennial Challenges. How does NASA plan on improving that and capitalizing on that going forward?
Well, that's part of what we're trying to do. I'm heading up a communications review right now to see how do we do a better job of reaching the public with our messages. And so the people that do the Centennial Challenges are on that team. I'll have to admit, as I was even preparing that one slide, I didn't realize there was many Centennial Challenges going on as there is. It was like 10 or 12 or something. What? So, you know, this comes back to NASA's doing so many things. Sometimes it's hard to keep up on it all, and I work there every day. So we do need, I think that is something worthy of highlighting. The other reason it's worthy of highlighting is because it's an administration priority. If you go to the White House website, I think they actually have somewhere to go to that talks about prizes, and not just for NASA, but for other agencies. So the more we can tie ourselves to national priorities, the better it is. The space program is all about what we can do for the public. It's not about what we can do about what we want to do. And for too long, that's how NASA has viewed things. Oh, well, we can go to the moon because we can, so let's go do it. Well, all right, well, what's the national need that going back to the moon is the answer to? And we've done a lousy job of articulating that. And we work on it every day. Well, there's this Google Lunar X Prize that Google is the sponsor for. But is it is NASA? I don't even know. Is it NASA money?
I think NASA money for science use.
Yes, that's right.
It's a way of piggyback.
Yeah, so we're piggybacking on a privately sponsored prize by using, or we will purchase science information from any of these people that are able to get there. And there's some very exciting things going on with those lunar groups that are doing things. And I think you'll see some very interesting opportunities for public participation through what they're doing. One other statement on public participation. NASA needs to get to the point where public participation in communications is a level 1 requirement. It's something we think about the day that a new program is announced. If it's not done then, it becomes an afterthought, or it's not a requirement and it never gets done. I will give you the most famous example of this. For the Apollo 11 moon landing, last year we provided some funding to transfer those images into HD. I had a chance to meet the 2 guys that were responsible for developing the camera that flew on the moon. I said, please clear up an urban legend for me. I had heard that we almost didn't have a camera on Apollo 11. I said, that can't be true. They go, absolutely, it was true. Up to about 8 months before the landing, one of the lead people, I think in the astronaut office, said they didn't have a requirement for television on the moon. Now, thankfully, cooler heads prevailed. As it turned out, we had black and white. We could have had color, but that was a few pounds more, so they didn't do that. But can you imagine what the Apollo 11 moon landing would have been like without television? Consequently, you might say, oh, well, certainly we don't think that way anymore. The Orion vehicle, I was told by somebody at Marshall, and I'm still trying to understand this, while it has cameras on board, does not have a capability to download live imagery. I don't understand how that's happened. And it's an example of, obviously, nobody thought about communications as a level 1 requirement when they designed the requirements for Orion, and I think that is outrageous. Yeah.
Would anybody at Marshall get fired for that?
Well, that's a great question. I almost got fired because I said bite me. So I guess it's more about what you say than what you do. No, evidently nobody's going to get fired. But, well, because at the level 1 requirement, it wasn't decided. So you can't go back and say, well, I got to fire you because of, it just wasn't the way we thought. We've got to turn the culture around. And this is a lesson for all you budding scientists and engineers. And I must say, over the years, I've become much more optimistic about this, that you all get that communications is as important as the engineering and science stuff you do. A good example, when I was back at NASA the last time, there was a Galileo press conference, and they had these 2 rows of scientists on a riser talking about the Galileo program. And it was live on NASA TV. It was a press conference, and these guys were droning on and on. I was in the administrator's office, Dan Logan, at the time, and we're watching it on TV, and his hair went on fire. Because he said, these people are not talking to the American public. They're talking down to the public. How dare they? This is the public's program. And he literally ran down to the auditorium after the press conference and cursed them all out. And said, don't you ever do a program like that again where you speak in language that the public can't understand. So I implore you, as you do your work, to make sure you think about communications. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about what you want to do. We've got to get the public along to want to support what you want to do. Otherwise, you're going to be in the situation we are now, where we're constantly struggling to justify our existence. And I can think of few other federal agencies that have to fight every year to justify their existence. Is anybody here? Okay, I'll just keep going. Yeah?
Do you think it's best for NASA if it dedicates itself to one ambitious goal?
That's a good question. I'd like to actually have some conversation with you all about that. The question was, should we set one single goal? I personally think that NASA is an agency that has these 4 missions: aeronautics, space and earth science, space operations, and exploration. To me, it's hard to find a single goal that ties all those things together because, I mean, you could, and maybe if there's going to be a reduction on funding, maybe that's the answer. Maybe you focus, okay, we're going to do one goal, we're going to send people to an asteroid, and therefore everything we do is focused towards that. Maybe that would be a more efficient use of money. Unfortunately, because we're engaged in such a broad range of activities, I see that we lose a lot of other opportunities, and we lose the benefit of what those opportunities can bring forward. So I must admit, I'm of a mixed mind. I guess in an unconstrained budget situation, I would say I'm not in favor of a single goal. In a constrained budget environment, maybe that's the way we're going to have to go. I do want you to take a look at the model of space science. They use the National Research Council from the National Academy of Sciences to set their goals and priorities. And they have done this routinely for the last at least 30 years, maybe more. They have done an excellent job of setting priorities of all these different science disciplines to make sure that, okay, this year maybe astrophysics gets the lead, but the next year it'll be heliophysics, it'll be earth science, and they've set out this well-documented path, and it has worked very well. And now their budget is up to $5 billion a year. They didn't sit around and wait for a president to stand up and give them a single goal of what to do with space science. They just went out and did it. Now, my criticism of the human spaceflight community is they were all hung up in the Apollo model. They kept waiting around for a president to stand up and give them a goal, and then that would justify what they did, instead of doing the hard work of setting out some priorities and building a pathway to go forward. And when we did get presidents to stand up and give a new goal, how did that work out? Didn't work with George Bush the first. Clinton's focus was on international cooperation on the space station. George Bush II stood up and said it again. He gave us a goal, didn't fund it. And now Obama has given us a goal about going to an asteroid. That doesn't seem to exactly caught on. So this whole thing about goals and waiting for presidents is a great book you should read. It's The Myth of Presidential Leadership about space exploration, and it kind of outlines all that. So I don't know. You all tell me if we should have a single goal or if we should be more broad. Is there anybody? What's your time?
We're way ahead. Keep going.
Oh, way ahead. Yes.
What do you think the future market is for commercial astronauts or people who will work in space who are not government?
Well, I think it's very good, and if these companies succeed, because they will have their own astronauts. And in fact, some of them are using former astronauts now to help them make sure their systems are safe, to help with the operational procedures they're going to need. And I can think of probably 5 to 10 astronauts that are already with some of these different companies helping them out. So that's a new career path. Whether or not current astronauts have the upper leg on that is to be seen. But there's nothing to keep a private company from going to the same well that NASA has, which are military pilots.
Just a small question about something you said a while back. What kind of, you mentioned among other things, among other possible uses for the National Space Station, the Department of Agriculture?
Yes.
Are they going to be growing crops on the space station, or?
What do they do?
How do you?
It involves plants. Something green. I don't know, you stumped me, I don't know. I just heard about it the other day.
And
So.
what about diplomatic uses?
Such as?
I mean, you mentioned like science and diplomacy, and like there may be diplomats on the space station.
No, I meant in terms of bringing in other countries perhaps to be partners to, and certainly, 50 years ago, Russia and America were at each other's throat in the space race. Now we're locked arm in arm on the space station, and other countries have come in. The big question on the table is, will China be brought into the International Space Station? The administrator just went there a couple weeks ago. That's going to be a long process. That's not going to happen overnight. It'll start small. It's already started with science exchanges. It'll gradually build into other things. So we'll see, but then it becomes very controversial with politicians, because there's some politicians that don't want anything to do with China. Didn't even want the administrator to go to China. There are others that thought it was great to open things up and to start to learn more about them. So that's what I meant by diplomacy. And I primarily was thinking China, probably India as well. Yes?
You said that the International Space Station is going to extend to the year 2020. At that point, the money started to show its age, so we don't really know what's going to be completed on the next iteration of the International Space Station.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, he's asking, if the space station's going till 2020, what's going to happen afterwards? There are no plans at the moment for a Space Station 2, because NASA's going to put its emphasis on beyond low Earth orbit. This is what we feel most of the public thinks we should be doing, is going beyond low Earth orbit and leave low Earth orbit to the private sector. So it'll be interesting to see if people like Bob Bigelow with Bigelow Aerospace can make his space station successful, not only as a, quote, space hotel, but as perhaps a research center that people will want to send experiments up to. And I think he's already made some agreements with people to do that very thing. So in the big scheme of things, the plan is for NASA to leave low Earth orbit behind to the commercial sector, and we'll go on to more challenging missions such as visitations to asteroids, perhaps a return to the moon at some point, or eventually on Mars. Yes?
With the continuation of the space station, but the ending of the shuttle, we're just going to rely on the Russians for the next 10 years?
We're going to rely on the Russians as long as we have to, until the private sector comes up with a certified vehicle that can take our crew members up to the space station. So that's what the COTS program hopefully will lead to, this whole commercial crew and cargo program. Is that what you're talking about tomorrow? You are, okay. You'll hear more about that tomorrow.
With the end of the shuttle and the completion of the space station, and even a fairly narrow window to end the space station, does anybody at NASA have an idea of what the next big thing is that will keep this international partnership together?
Oh, it'll be wrapped around any of these human exploration missions that are taken on. So in other words, the asteroid mission will definitely be an international cooperative. Going back to the moon will be international. Anything, I think because of the cost involved and because of the success of the International Space Station, we pretty much feel that international cooperation is the way to go.
To expand on the previous point, no NASA spacecraft has ever flown actually human rated. So, do you think that would you provide similar certificates of flight for craft such as Dragon or other commercial?
Well, they're looking at that entire how to do human rating, what is acceptable. That is an area that is so fraught with political landmines that I don't choose to step on that one. Thank you.
Alan, you mentioned you were a humanities student in college. Two things. One is, I suspect, and it would be great if you would after a show of hands, that we have students here that are not engineering or not science, that have either a double major or a major that's outside that. That'd be interesting to know. But if you could offer a perspective of the opportunities for those studying at college level whose passion is not in the engineering science, or us.
Yeah. Let's see a show. Who's an engineering major? Okay. Science major? Okay. And non-science or engineering? Or double degree? Okay. Well, I'm here to tell you, there are opportunities to work in the space program. I have had a fabulous career in the nonprofit sector, in the government, both as a civil servant and as a political appointee, in major companies like Northrop Grumman, startup companies like Zero G and Space.com. You just have to be out there, network. And I know that's what you all are so good with, is networking. And you can find something to do. If I can find something to do, I've been employed for 35 years. And I've jumped around a little bit, but because it's always, I wanted to try different things. You may choose to stick with one company for the life of your career. And if that's what you want to do, that's great. Or you may decide to work for the government and put in your 20 years and then go and work with a private company or entrepreneurial company. And maybe that works for you. But you got to find out what works. And I would recommend giving it a little thought someday and putting out a kind of a roadmap of what you see for yourself. I did that back in 1988. I did a little roadmap of where I kind of wanted to go or where I was thinking. And I pulled it out the other day, and I was astonished about how closely my career has actually followed. And I couldn't even dream of some of the things that I thought about that have occurred back in 1988. So give some thought to where you want to go, and don't be afraid to make a jump. Now, making jumps from place to place can play havoc with your retirement plans. So if that's important to you, you want to keep that in mind. So I will be working forever because I screwed up my retirement plans. But there are opportunities there, but take advantage of networks. And the other thing I would say is I am a huge believer in mentoring. Get somebody to mentor you. Get somebody to care about you and your career, and who can give you advice on where, what kind of, if you're confused on your career, or